I'm so glad you all came to see me tonight. It's like I was saying on the phone. It was huge, and it flew so fast it was like lightning, and practically made no sound. Wait, you guys aren't from the police department. Who are you?
Who we are is none of your business. Just look right here. You won't remember a thing.
Hello, and welcome back to Overtime Alien. This is your host, the Alien Narc. Thank you all for coming back to see us again after episode 1. Now, those of you that remember, in episode 1 we covered one of my personal UFO experiences. And that was fun to talk about. I like talking about those in more full detail. So, how many of us have had a UFO experience? Or heard a story from a friend or a family member that have? This led me to start thinking about what are your odds of seeing a UFO in your lifetime? Well, it turns out it may actually depend more on where you live. If you go by sightings and where UFOs have been reported, for example, if you live in North Carolina, according to the Charlotte Observer, you have a 1 in 135,500 chances, or odds, of seeing a UFO. In California, even with its large population and its light pollution, the odds are 1 in 168,700 in spotting a UFO. I feel the odds would be even greater, more likely, if you will, in areas that don't have as much light pollution, where you can actually see the skies and stars on clear nights. Like in the USA, that would probably lead us to areas within the Four Corners, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, but also like Wyoming and Montana and other forested areas or areas that have a lot of desert in the surrounding area. Just as I spoke about last time, my UFO encounter that came with lost time was in the desert in Utah. There was no light pollution. It was just a beautiful, clear sky full of stars. So this week I have been watching a lot of Hangar 1. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, it's a series that's on Netflix, and it has cases that have been locked up by MUFON that are now being allowed to be documented and reenacted in the series. Again, that's called Hangar 1. About 3 episodes in, and it starts talking about the Men in Black, some of their sightings, and how people were treated by them when interrogated. Some can only remember these men in black suits showing up, but have hours or even a full day of lost time that they can't recall. Looking back through some history, I was able to find some info I had not come across yet. So, did any of you know that a few centuries ago the Men in Black were categorized as being in a league with Satan, the devil, Lucifer? It was noted that Satan would appear to people in black or gray clothing that was very sharp and elegant, set to the era that they were in at the time, but he was generally accompanied by 2 or 3 men that were all dressed in black, as if to be a part of his council, if you will. Now that got me scratching my head. It never stated that they had had an alien encounter, but that the devil was noted as the grandfather, quote. This info was also found in the UFO book by Jerome Clark, so it is in his little encyclopedia, but these Men in Black were also noted as the grandfather's boys. Now, I am not convinced of this. I just want to share what I found. But you can't tell me that didn't give you some chills, regardless of your belief system or your way of scientific thinking. Now, as time moved forward, the men in black were noted to appear minutes or days after an encounter. From what I could find in my research, depending on the severity of the encounter, the quicker the men in black would arrive. One such event happened to a soldier in Utah. Outside of a military base, he was out on a nightly patrol where he saw what appeared to be an almond-shaped vessel, which moved elegantly, swiftly, and appeared to move with purpose. The soldier called to his supervisor to report what he had seen. And as he was explaining to his supervisor, his superior in a way, another voice began to respond to him on the radio. One that he did not know, nor did he recognize. Soon after, the soldier was given a direct order to come to a certain area of the base where he was unpleasantly greeted by the man that was on the other side of the radio. And you guessed it, he was dressed in a very nice, pressed black suit. The standard MIB uniform that we think of when we see Will Smith or Tommy Lee Jones sporting in the film. Now, the soldier was placed in handcuffs, was treated as a criminal, and was interrogated for what he felt were hours, asking him the same questions in a cruel manner as if to blame him for the incident. The soldier was then told by the man in black. There were two, but only one seemed to talk to him. He said, "If you haven't noticed, we are surrounded by desert, and it would take people months or years to ever find your body." What? I mean, even if they did kill him, it's going to get covered up. They're going to shoot him with some unknown weapon and say that he was downed, like, while trying to help someone or to save someone. They would probably turn it into something good for the news or for the family, but no one besides he and the MIB and probably the military would have ever known that that was what happened, right? So, we have this story from the soldier as he kept it to himself for nearly 2 decades until he fully retired. He came forth and divulged his experience in grave detail, including the almond-shaped craft, the bright illuminating blue light that it emulated, but also that he couldn't see what may have been under the craft as the light was so bright he could not make out anything underneath. Another encounter came from a young woman that I've decided to call Emily, who had just moved with her family to the countryside of Maine. One of her first nights in bed, she noted that her room began to fill with a bright light, and as Emily looked outside, she saw what appeared to be a circular-shaped UFO. It then flew away without any sound. However, the next night, Emily stayed up all night waiting on the porch with her binoculars ready in hand, this time to see what they were up to, or what it was up to. She didn't know what it was. And sure enough, later that night, the craft showed up, this time hovering over their field. Then, through her binoculars, she could see what appeared to be 3 small beings that were, ta-da, not human. Due to Emily's description, I would say she probably saw some gray aliens. She said they were short men, not wearing clothes, close to the ground, and appeared to be kind of walking around and moving things. Emily watched as they walked around under the craft, got back in, and then sped away into the night sky as if they were never there. She ran to her parents' room to wake up her father, who came out with her to observe the area that she had said there was this craft and that it had hovered and all these things happened. But directly underneath was a massive crop circle. Sadly, Emily's father did not react in the way that she had hoped, as her father started the tractor that morning and mowed the crop circle to erase it from their field and their memories. Or so the father had hoped. That night, the parents went out for a family night and encouraged Emily to come with them, but she refused. I'm sure it was a protest, She was still pissed at her dad for covering up the fact that they had a crop circle in their field. Now, as she was making her way around the farm later that evening, she noticed a dark black sedan that was pulling up to their property. She hid and watched as two men got out of the sedan and walked straight into the field where the crop circle had been. And guess what they were wearing? Ta-da! MIB uniform! How did these men know right where to go, though? She watched them closely as they took samples of the grass and dirt, and she began to feel like she too was being watched, but from behind. The next thing she remembers is waking up an entire day later, as if nothing had happened. Now, break from the story. Do they really have a brain neuralizer? And I promise I don't mean that as sarcasm or as a joke. Seriously, how is it that we can account for lost time but not be able to recall what happened? I just think about Emily and her story, and I have no idea what happened from there because that was where the information stopped. That was where the line seemed to end. It was like you wanted more, you cast it out, your bait, and you reeled it in as far as you could, and then the line broke and the fish took it to the bottom of the water. Or, in this case, the UFO took it into the galaxies, far, far away. But now that we've gone through these two things, let's have a little bit of a quick summary time. All right, so it appears to me that if the men in black are real, and they really are some secret government entity that's just out there seeking to muzzle those that have had experiences of UFOs, aliens, UAPs, and even USOs, unidentified submerged objects. Why aren't there more documented stories, or encounters, if you will, with the men in black? Or are they really that good at silencing those they interrogate? And how is it that they can wipe memories away? Are they of an extraterrestrial nature themselves? Are they themselves aliens or beings from another planet? Now, I believe that the men in black are real. I would say they are more of a global entity, more than a single nation or government. I don't understand how the lost time comes into play, but also why some account, such as the soldier in Utah, was allowed to maintain his memory of the incident and of the men in black. Now, maybe he was just so terrified. I mean, he obviously didn't talk about it until the very end of his retirement, after he had finished in the military, and who knows how many months or years it took after that to feel comfortable to still divulge that information. But there are some things that we will never know. But that's what we are here for. I'm here to analyze what I can find, attempt to debunk what I can, and speculate. But we also need to make note of those things that can't be explained. So tell me, what are your thoughts on the men in black? Do you know anyone that has come forward with a story or UFO experience and was then suddenly very odd or quiet, even may have recanted their experience as if they had been threatened with death or imprisonment? It really is something to consider. I want to hear any stories or experiences that any of you have had. So please hit me up at cupinvestigations@gmail.com. That's cupinvestigations@gmail.com. And don't forget to check out our sister page, Central Utah Paranormal, on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. But most importantly, keep your eyes on the skies and on the lookout for black suits in black sedans. Until next week, this has been the Alien Narc, bringing you, our favorite listeners, information and research of current UFO events as well as historic sightings that still need to be considered, remembered, and documented. So please, all of you, have a great week. Thanks for coming, and we'll see you next week with another episode of Overtime Alien. This has been your favorite humanoid host, the Alien Narc, only here on the Overtime Alien Podcast. Be sure to click that favorite button, add us to your playlist, so you'll never miss an episode. Buckle up, stay seated, and join us on our extraterrestrial journey.